Brains, 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 ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's funny, whenever I come down here to start setting up for a video, get all the lights turned on, set up the camera, take notes, even though most of the notes are not on the actual video itself, they're on oh, actually, no, there is one thing that is written on this piece of paper that's actually relevant to the topic we are discussing today. Everything else is octopus facts, but whatever. When I'm setting stuff up, I like to listen to music in the background to kind of get me pumped up for the video, and it may or may not have anything to do with the actual, topic we're discussing for One Piece. But today, because we're talking about Vegapunk's Brain Fruit, I had a certain song stuck in my head, and I had to listen to it. So, do you remember The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy? Yeah, you see where I'm going with this. In the first season, there was that one episode that was not even an episode. It was only 5 minutes long, but the whole thing was a musical number about this alien that crashes to Earth that eats brains. And so the alien meets Billy, and Billy goes around the town and just grabs the entire town and gets their brains sucked out. But there's this really awesome song in the background that's like, brains, brains, I don't lie. I'll eat their brains till I'm zombified. Sure, they might think it's deranged, but I don't give it a thought if I don't have a brain. So yeah, brains, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Vegapunk's Devil Fruit, the Nomi, sorry, the Nomi, okay, sorry, my throat is still, the Nomi, there we go, and that right there is the only note that I have for the actual topic, because originally I was looking it up to see, because no can mean brain, but it can also mean memory, but it actually takes its name from Nomi So, which Nomi So can literally mean brain tissue, like the tissue that makes up the brain, which makes sense given the fact that Vegapunk's fruit allows his brain to expand. So a little bit of a, etymology kind of note there involving, the brain fruit. Okay, so did you guys expect Vegapunk to have a devil fruit? That's the first question, something that you really honestly have to consider with every One Piece character whenever they get introduced. Do they have a devil fruit or don't they? There was even a while there where I was even debating whether or not Kaido had a devil fruit. It was because Shanks is a Yonko, he doesn't have one, so I was like, maybe Big Mom has one, Whitebeard had one, maybe Kaido doesn't. Maybe he's just this really big, strong, tough guy, and that's just why he's a Yonko, right? But now then we find out Kaido is a duck, actually a dragon, but at least he's not a turkey, because it's Thanksgiving, and we eat turkeys. There's one in the oven right now, and I gotta be honest with you, this is a caveat, and we'll get right back to it, but turkey's kind of overrated for Thanksgiving, right? I'm not wrong on that, right? I'm not weird. I know that might be kind of sacrilegious to say, but in terms of the tier list of birds that are consumable by humans, turkey is mid-tier at best, right? Yeah. Anyway, that's a debate for another day. Oh my god, what did I just start? Just everybody's in the chat now, who cares about Vegapunk's ability? We have to have this debate right now for Thanksgiving. Okay, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, did you expect him to have a devil fruit? Because I really didn't. That kind of came out of left field for me when he revealed that, oh yeah, yes, the reason my brain was so big was because I ate a devil fruit, the brain fruit. Because the way that Oda, designs his characters and the logic and the physics that work in the One Piece world, you could literally just get away with saying that, oh yeah, Vegapunk was so much of a super genius that his brain literally expanded, like Megamind or something, right? Just yeah, sure, why not? He's a genius, therefore he would obviously have a giant brain. Moria looks like an onion. Does that mean he ate the onion fruit? I don't think that was a requirement or a power from the Kage Nomi. So yeah, Moria just looks like that, okay? So you don't have to explain everything, but in this instance, it is important to explain exactly what's going on with Vegapunk's brain, because this is probably going to be extraordinarily relevant later on. So the brain fruit itself actually has a really simple ability. It just essentially gives you, I hesitate to say infinite, but it definitely gives you a lot more storage space in your brain. It basically gives you perfect eidetic or photographic memory or perfect recall of anything that you encounter, any experience, okay? So it's better than any other, because I don't even know if photographic memory really exists. There's certainly people that have better memories than others, but is it truly perfect photographic memory? I think that's something that's been, analyzed and debated of whether or not that's actually true. But in the case with Vegapunk's, it is. So Vegapunk could read a book, and he can literally, at any time, just summon up I was reading this book on physics 3.5 years ago, and I can recall on page 271 it said this, or it had this formula. he can literally do that because of his ability, okay? It's also very, very important to mention, and I even saw a few people, even though this was referenced in the chapter, I still saw a few people in the comments section bringing it up, like they believe that the reason Vegapunk is a genius is because of the brain fruit. So that is not the case. He did not eat the genius fruit. Like, he ate the fruit and then all of a sudden all of the knowledge of the cosmos just like enlightened. That's not how it works. It just gives him more storage space. And he even says in the chapter that it already expanded my already genius mind, okay? So look at it this way. Although it is important to mention also, the brain fruit was one of the reasons why he's the greatest scientist, the greatest genius of all time right now. Because back when Vegapunk was a kid, and I'm sure he was very brilliant and he was coming up with all these crazy inventions, but there was definitely a hard limit because his brain was still a normal human brain. He was just a genius, okay, probably like a normal genius in our world, all right? However, so he couldn't remember everything perfectly, right? He had to keep notes and everything around, but then once he ate the devil fruit, and we don't know exactly when he ate the devil fruit, we know at age 43 he already had a pretty large head, so he had to eat it, probably several years, several decades maybe before then. But it just, it augmented his abilities even further. Like, Law, being a doctor, is just made a better doctor or a better surgeon by eating the op fruit. Same thing with Vegapunk, okay? So Vegapunk might have never become, like, the most, applauded scientist in the entire world, the most advanced scientist, 500 years ahead of his contemporaries, if he never ate that fruit, because then he would just be limited by regular human physiology and the growth of the brain and stuff like that, and he would forget stuff just like normal humans forget stuff. He wouldn't have perfect recall. He would have to move some stuff out. He would be reading a book. Maybe he would forget some stuff, and he'd have to I have to refresh my memory. But because he has essentially, for all practical purposes, it might as well be infinite storage space, although the thing is, even though he might have infinite storage space, it has to, his brain still has to physically grow. So if you really start thinking about it, his brain could grow to, astronomical proportions, right? Right now, his brain is in a hangar on this giant egg on Egghead Island, but if it kept growing, it could be the size of a mountain, it could be the size of a planet, Vegapunk's brain could be the size of a galaxy, with all this knowledge inside of it, but eventually you'd think it would get so big. Maybe could Vegapunk's brain be larger than the size of the known universe, or maybe the not just the observable universe, but even the unobservable universe? It encompasses all things, all matter. It just becomes Vegapunk's brain, okay? So, it's probably never going to get nearly that big, so that's, for all practical purposes, it might as well be infinite. But yeah, because he ate that fruit, he's able to remember everything, and so it's like, okay, now he's the greatest scientist ever, because every crazy idea he has, he can kind of keep and reference at any moment. He could probably multitask really well. He can have, this idea open and this idea, and just everything's in his head because he has so much extra storage space. Now, there are some downsides to this. The biggest one is, of course, your head gets so damn big, you literally can't move, or it becomes encumbering. You can't walk through doors anymore, okay? Which means the natural enemy of Vegapunk's brain fruit is Bluino's door fruit. Think about it. Bluino opens a door, but Vegapunk can't fit through the door because his brain's too big. So that's that. Now, Vegapunk, though, did get around this weakness because, once again, he has such a big brain, he could, expend a lot of power trying to figure out exactly how to solve that issue. So, after a couple of decades of having this fruit, and his brain was about the size of a giant, as was mentioned, his entire body was about, at least 12 meters tall, around the same size as a giant, he probably couldn't move that well, so he's like, all right, I have to think of this solution to this problem. And so he figures out a way to do it, and it basically involves him cutting off his head, cutting off the top portion of his head. He didn't die. He was still there. Now, how exactly he did that, that's, I think, where the One Piece logic sort of comes into play here. But at the end of the day, he figured out a way to take his brain and then move it into the hangar on Egghead. and then connect it with an antenna and basically Wi-Fi. So now not only himself, but all of his satellite bodies can synchronize with his brain as like this central hub, and then they can add all the information to it, okay? Some people brought up how this was like actually a stupid idea because now that the brain is in like a stationary location, maybe it can be attacked, it can be destroyed. And I'm going to bring up a few things here that Vegapunk is a super genius. I don't think he's just going to leave his brain sitting around unguarded. So that, you know, Punk Records, you know, in the egg, number one, that egg might be able to move. You know, it's like the egg doesn't have to be stationary. The egg might be able to get up and move around with Vegapunk because Vegapunk wants Luffy to take him off of Egghead. So I don't think he's just going to leave all of his collected knowledge behind. He could probably just be like, push a button and the egg could just... And the egg might be a spaceship. The egg might be a flying device or something like that. Also, I'm sure it is reinforced with a lot of metal. Maybe it's Wapo metal. Maybe it's Sea Prism, whatever. And I'm sure there's like a bunch of security drones and like laser sentries and stuff surrounding it. I don't think somebody can just walk into Punk Records and just burn the whole thing down, you know, and just like, well, that's it for Vegapunk's brain. I don't think that's going to happen, right? Also, you don't have to worry about the Cypher Pole doing that because the government even gave them expressed orders, like do not damage anything on the island itself, okay? That might be the government's plan. They might know about Punk Records. They might know about Vegapunk's brain. So they're like, just eliminate Vegapunk's main body and then keep the brain there. Also, Vegapunk might have made copies of his brain. You know, he might have copied it or whatever onto an SD card or like a flash drive or something. And so, you know, the main brain is in the hangar, which synchronizes, but maybe he might be able to make copies of it that are stored somewhere else. You know, I don't think Vegapunk would just leave his brain there unguarded that anybody could just destroy. And it's like, well, that's all the collective knowledge I have, just gone in an instant. So don't worry about it. I think Vegapunk's planned this ahead. Although, this does bring up a very interesting question here. Since Vegapunk is a Devil Fruit user, and then he cloned himself into 6 distinct bodies that are also connected to his same brain. So these 7 bodies, the main Stella body, and then Shaka, Lilith, Edison, Pythagoras, Atlas, and York, all share the same brain and are all drawing from it and adding to it. Does that make the satellite bodies Devil Fruit users as well? Or would they succumb to the same weaknesses as other Devil Fruit users? Like, can Shaka swim? Now, with some of the clone bodies, you get the impression that they're like normal clones of like human beings. Like Lilith and York and Atlas, they look like regular humans. I mean, Atlas is really big. She's giant-sized, but still, they look like biological beings, okay? Pythagoras and Edison look like robots. They might be robots. They might just be people inside of robot costumes or robot like armor or something. Shaka, I think, is human as well. He just has like the fancy, you know, Daft Punk helmet on or whatever. I think if he took that off, he would have like a normal human appearance. So that brings up the question, like, are they able to swim? Because they are cloned from Vegapunk. And it was already mentioned that devil fruits, when you eat one, it changes your lineage factor. It alters your DNA. So, and we've, you know, kind of explored this a little bit with Momonosuke's devil fruit, how it's a clone of Kaido's, you know, Vegapunk took Kaido's DNA, his lineage factor, and then engineered a, you know, copy of his devil fruit from the DNA. So, you know, it definitely messes with you on that front. So I guess it would depend on when Vegapunk made the clones. I'm pretty damn sure, I'm in fact 100% sure, Vegapunk cloned himself after he ate the Nomi Nomi Nomi, because he already had the giant head back during, you know, Ohara, and then, you know, obviously he didn't have the clones back then because he just started working for the government. He just started getting the funding. So I think he cloned himself after, so they would still have the same DNA as Vegapunk, which is DNA that has been altered by the Nomi Nomi Nomi. So I'm actually thinking none of the satellite bodies can swim. And they're all technically the users. So technically there would be 7 users of the Nomi 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 for that reason. So let me know what you think about that. Something else that I came up with that might be a little portentous, possibly. You can think of it like as a thought experiment. And this sort of goes back to the infinity thing that we were discussing. Because whenever you start talking about infinity, and I've done it before, you know, even in the context of like a fictional world, like your brain starts to get a little bit like, I don't know. All right. So I started thinking about all the stuff that Vegapunk could store in his brain, right? Like, so every book he's ever read, every scientific principle, scientific, you know, discoveries he himself made, but also every mistake he's done as well. So, like, every mistake that he's ever done in his entire life is perfectly recallable with 100% clarity because, you know, human memory is not that great. Like, it really isn't. I think we think of it as way better than it really is. Here's an example of this. I remember, I think I have a fairly good memory of, like, my childhood, you know, like, playing around my neighborhood and stuff, and, like, my little Hot Wheel car, you know, those little Hot Wheels you could get with a little battery and everything like that. So I thought I always had, like, a really good memory of that. And recently I found a bunch of pictures, and I was going through them when I was a little kid, and I'm just looking at the neighborhood and the way that, like, the houses looked and, like, my neighbor's yard. And my neighbor's yard had these two giant, like, pine trees in his front yard. And I had completely forgotten that those existed, and they had been there for, like, my entire childhood, and I remember, like, playing around them, and then, like, I forgot about them, and I just saw the picture. I'm like, oh, that's right, those existed, you know, and I'm just like, wait, yeah, that's weird. So, yeah, human memory's not that great, but with Vegapunk, perfect 100% recall. Anyway, that's not the thought experiment. Here is the thought experiment. Do you guys know about pie? I'm not talking about delicious pumpkin pie, which I'm sure a lot of you are enjoying for Thanksgiving today. I'm talking about the number pi. 3.14159217356. I'm just making up numbers. I don't know. I think I got it right to like the 6th spot or whatever, anything like that. There are actual competitions for people to see how high they can recite pi to whatever place, you know, to like the 700th place, because it's infinite, right? So this is a sort of like, you know, this is sort of like immovable object meets like insurmountable force kind of like philosophy sort of question for you here, okay? If Vegapunk's brain's storage space is truly infinite and his brain just keeps expanding, what would happen if Vegapunk just sat there and just started reciting pi and just never stopped and just kept going and going and going and going? The 1,000th place, 10,000th place, 100th billionth place, 1 quintillion of a place, 1 nonillion of a place, a Googleplex of a place. You know, it just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. That is a way that you could end everything, all life as you know it in the One Piece world. Because Vegapunk, so I looked up on the wiki, and the wiki says actually right here in the trivia, and I quote, "This is one of the few devil fruits that has no known combative capabilities." Bull to the shit power, all right? Vegapunk could end the entire universe by just sitting there and reciting pi. And then at Punk Records, his brain just begins to expand larger and larger. It covers the entire planet. It covers the entire solar system, the entire galaxy. It keeps getting bigger. It reaches the brink of the universe. The universe is straining. All the fabric of reality begins to bend at his Vegapunk's will. And just like... And then everything breaks and just... It's back to the singularity again. And there's nothing. Nothing exists. The universe broke because of pi. I think that's a very likely... Okay, let's dial it back a bit there. Maybe not expanding to the size of the universe. But let's say Vegapunk traveled to the moon, and then while he was on the moon and connected to Punk Records, he could just recite pi on the moon, and then eventually his brain would just cover the entire planet. Solves every problem right there. All the pirates are dead, all the revolutionaries are dead, all the Marines are dead, the world government, everybody's just gone. It's just, Vegapunk's brain is just the planet. There you go. Done. No combative abilities, I say that. Also, I mean, just from like a literal standpoint also, I mean, he might not have combative abilities in the sense of like, here goes my brain cannon. I would love it for him to use a brain cannon. Come on, let's Oda give him a brain cannon. Come on, just have Vegapunk just like, I channel the power of lasers into my brain, and he could fire a brain cannon. But I mean, he could come up with a bunch of brilliant tactics for battle, how to build new weapons of war, you know, so like, you know, he might not be directly combatively capable, but like overall, the kind of stuff he created for the Marines so far, the pacifistas, the Seraphim, for example, I mean, he could come up with some pretty wild stuff. I'm just saying, you know? This also brings up an interesting question. And this is something that was kind of brought up at the end of Wano, but I think it's time that we finally have this discussion, because at first it was sort of maybe just happen chance. But now that we learn a little bit more about devil fruits, I'm actually starting to be curious if this is the direction Oda is going. Okay. So the first thing that got a lot of people thinking about this is during Wano, when the Gorosei mentioned that devil fruits, at least zones, have a will of their own. And so that got you thinking, like, maybe, you know, the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, Luffy's fruit, the Gumu Gumu no Mi, chose Luffy specifically to be the next user of the power. Okay? Now, that makes a little bit more sense because it's a zone. Zones are living things, so therefore maybe the souls of the animal or whatever are in there. Okay, fine. What if all devil fruits have a will of their own? What if Logias have a will of their own, Paramecias have a will of their own, and they can choose to some extent who their next users are going to be? I'm just saying, the fact that Law, who is one of the most brilliant surgeons in the entire world, has the Op fruit. Now, you might say, yeah, the whole machinations of, like, you know, Diaz Barrels and the Marines and Doflamingo and, of course, Corazon helped him out. But, like, that's what I mean. Like, everything just kind of seems to line it up perfectly so Law could get that fruit. And then we have Vegapunk, who has the power of the Brain fruit, which is he is the perfect individual on the entire planet to have that fruit. Now, you could just say maybe he directly sought it out, like he learned about the brain fruit, and he's like, I need that for science, and he just sought it out, found it, and ate it. Sure, fine. But now I'm starting to think, like, is Oda going a direction with this where all devil fruits have a sense of will to an extent, and so they can kind of seek out their next user? Even if it's not, like, in a super direct way. It's not like, you know, the devil fruit will just magically grow in the backyard of, like, Vegapunk's house or something. Like, oh, what a strange fruit. Oh, you know, although maybe it could. I don't know. But it's just like, I don't know, like, I don't know. I don't know what to really think about it yet, but it's just something I'm starting to think, because it's like, man, Law has, like, the best fruit he could possibly have. Luffy's fruit is, like, meant for him. You know, Vegapunk's fruit's, like, meant for him. And there's a lot of other devil fruits in that regard as well that you can look at. Now, there's a lot that don't. You know, there's a lot of characters you can look at, and it's like, this character having this devil fruit, it doesn't really work that well. You know, this character would have a much better devil fruit. Then there's the whole thing with Blackbeard's crew going devil fruit hunting, you know, finding specific devil fruits. They're actively going out and killing devil fruit users and taking the power, so that's something else altogether. But it's just a discussion more about, like, devil fruit wills. You know, is it just limited to zones, or is it limited to all devil fruits, and what exactly devil fruits are at their very core? And that's stuff we're going to find out, you know, in this arc with Vegapunk, most likely. But, yeah. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. And now we're going to be moving on to Octopus Facts. Woo, Octopus Facts. Woo. So this is a very interesting octopus fact. This is a recently discovered octopus. Yeah, this octopus was discovered in the year 2016. A whole 6 years ago, right? So this guy here is called the ghost octopus. Aw, look at him. He's also referred to as Casper, because I think there's only, like, one representative of his species that we've actually discovered so far. Live at the deepest depths, or they've been found at the deepest depths of all octopi. Okay, so in the ocean, there's different layers, right? And there's, like, the bathypelagic zone. The bathypelagic zone is the midnight zone. Whenever you think of, like, you know, like the angler fish in, like, Finding Nemo that have, like, the little light on their heads and stuff, like the phosphorescence and everything like that, that's the midnight zone. That's the bathypelagic zone. But that bathypelagic zone is only 1 to 4 kilometers down. All right, it's not like you anglerfish as living at the very, very bottom of the ocean, like in the darkest parts of the ocean. That's not true. It's actually kind of in the middle part compared to the entire ocean, just because there's not a lot of light that, right? Like, there's, like, nothing that reaches the bottom. No lights, super high pressure, constantly, like, at 4 degrees Celsius. You know, not a lot of stuff can live at the very, very, very bottom of the ocean, right? Well, anyway, these octopi live in the bathypelagic zone. They live about 2.6 kilometers deep, which is the deepest that any octopus has been found. Now, their behavior is very similar to other octopuses. They'll lay a bunch of eggs, and then they can come out, and then they'll protect them and everything like that. And then sometimes they'll even starve to death from the lack of food, so the same kind of thing is there. But yeah, they usually lay their eggs around dead sea sponges. So they find, like, a corpse of SpongeBob SquarePants, and they'll lay their eggs around that. So that's fascinating to hear about. But yeah, those are the ghost octopus, Casper. Yeah, so maybe we'll find more of those. They were found around Hawaii as well, so there's that. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Tekking, signing out. I'm going to go check on that turkey.